Hi, so today we're going to be looking at a case study, and we are going to be looking at this case study in regards to ethics in the field of nutrition. So let's go ahead and look at the case study at hand. So in this case study, we have a patient who is complaining about being hooked up to machines and does not want to be on a feeding tube. The patient's daughter does not agree with her mother and wants her to remain on the feeding tube. The patient has been previously diagnosed with severe dementia, and the patient does not have an advance directive. So, going through this case study and just pointing out some important information, we could first see the patient has been diagnosed with severe dementia. So, dementia is a disease that affects the ability to remember, think, or make decisions, and it interferes with doing everyday activities. And in most cases, it affects a lot of older adults. So we could also look that the patient does not have an advance directive. So the definition of an advance directive is a legal documentation that a patient may complete to ensure a patient's wants and needs for medical treatments are followed if patients are unable to make their own decisions regarding healthcare. So in this instance, the patient does not have someone as that advance directive as of yet. And also, the patient is on a feeding tube. And if you do not know what feeding tubes are for, the feeding tube is a tube that supplies the nutrients to the patients that are not able to get the nutrients needed from food that they are able to obviously chew and digest on their own. So the tube is usually inserted through the nose or the belly area, and it's delivering nutrition directly to the stomach or small intestines. So like I said already, the patient in this scenario is on the feeding tube. She is diagnosed with dementia, and the patient is arguing that she does not want this feeding tube in her anymore, but the daughter is disagreeing with her mother. So now going into the 4 principles of ethics in this scenario, we could look at the 4 principles, and they are broken down into non-maleficence, autonomy, beneficence, and justice. So looking at the first one of competence and professional development in practice, or non-maleficence, it's recognizing limitations, using an evidence-based approach, using scientific evidence without personal bias, participating in generating research to enhance innovation, and exercising professional judgment. So the big key factors, we have to recognize the limitations, we have to recognize how much we're able to do within our field. Using evidence-based approach, you want to make sure that everything that you are saying is backed up with some sort of evidence, mostly scientific evidence. We have to make sure we don't have any personal bias in the scenarios with patients or in situations, and participating in generating research to enhance innovation. So finding updated innovations and research to help when dealing with patients on site, and exercising professional judgment. So you don't want to use any of your personal beliefs or personal opinions. You want to exercise every case using professional judgment and how you would want to look at different scenarios in the workplace. So the definition of non-maleficence is the intent to not inflict harm. So in these instances, we want to use evidence-based approaches and professional judgment in order to not inflict any harm within the patient. So let's move on to the second part, which is beneficence or professionalism. So this is broken down to contributing to decisions that affect well-being of patients, respecting our colleagues, demonstrating respect through social media and in person as well. We want to refrain from communicating misleading information, refrain from verbal, physical, emotional, sexual harassment. We want to uphold professional boundaries and refrain from any romantic relationships with coworkers and patients. So the key here is to remain professional. We want to be able to be respectful towards our colleagues, to our patients. We want to refrain from using any verbal or emotional wording that may upset the patient. Most likely, if you are not sure what to say, or if you think that what you are going to say may inflict some damage emotionally to a patient or to a colleague, it's best to not say it at all. And the definition of beneficence is balancing benefit and risk. So it encompasses taking positive steps to benefit others. So then we're going to go into the integrity in personal and organizational behaviors and practices, which is the definition of autonomy. So in autonomy, we want to make sure we disclose conflict of interest that include financial interest in products and services that are recommended, refrain from accepting any gifts or services that can influence professional judgment. We want to comply with the laws and regulations, provide truthful information, and report any inappropriate behavior and treatment of patients, respect intellectual property, and then respect the patient's autonomy, and we want to use encryption. So the key in autonomy is to disclose any conflict of interest. We want to refrain from accepting any source of gifts or services from the patients, from different companies, from coworkers, etc. Try to refrain from any of that. You want to follow the laws and regulations in your workplace, and you want to make sure you're providing truthful information. Again, no information that is misleading or not backed up with evidence. And we want to respect the intellectual property, and we want to use encryption when needed. So the definition of autonomy ensures the patient, client, or professional has the capacity and self-determination to engage in individual decision-making specific to the personal health or practice. So in this case, autonomy, we want to make sure the patient is able to have the capacity and self-determination to engage in decision-making. So we want to make sure in different cases, if the patient, based on their health records and their state of mind, if they're able to make their own decisions. We'll go more into that later on. And finally, going into justice and the social responsibility for local, regional, national, global nutrition and well-being. It highlights the importance of collaborating with others to reduce health and disparities, protect human rights, promote fairness, promote the unique role of nutrition dietetic practitioners, seek leadership opportunities in communities to enhance health and nutritional status while protecting the public. So in justice, we want to make sure we outreach in our community. We want to get involved, be leaders to promote the fairness and the uniqueness of being in the nutrition and dietetics roles. So justice, it really highlights, supports fair, equitable, and appropriate treatment for individuals and fair allocation of resources. So we want to treat every patient, every staff member, every coworker with the same amount of respect, regardless of background, regardless of disparities, etc. We just want to be fair to everyone and provide equal treatment to every individual that comes in and out of the workplace. So what ethical considerations are raised within the study? So breaking down the 4 principles of ethics that we already explained, we could look at the first one of non-maleficence, and in this case, we do not want to inflict harm onto the patient and recognizing limitations using evidence-based approach. So going back to this case study of the patient with dementia, we obviously don't want to inflict any harm to the patient, even though we know she is diagnosed with dementia. And we want to make sure we're using evidence-based approach when coming to her with the limitations that we're able to do within this case. So you want to make sure that whatever you're going to present to the patient, you can back up with some scientific evidence. So going into autonomy, we want to respect the patient, ensuring the patient has self-determination in individual decision-making and providing the truthful and lawful information. So in this instance, the patient is diagnosed with severe dementia. And like I said previously, dementia does affect the mind and you tend to forget things when you have dementia. So in this case, you would have to determine, does the patient have the self-capacity to make their own decisions? And looking at it in a professional viewpoint based on previous medical history, I would say that the patient does not have full capacity to make their own decisions based on the diagnosis of dementia. In this case, you still want to respect the patient, even though you know that the patient is not able to make their own decisions, because at the end of the day, they are still the patient, and we still want to show them the same respect we would to any other patient. And we want to make sure we're providing the truthful and lawful information. So again, you want to give them that evidence-based approach, and you want to come into the situation, providing anything that is with the law and that is truthful and not misleading to the patient and their family. So looking at beneficients, we want to contribute to decision making that will benefit the patient. So again, even though this patient in this case study does not want to be hooked up to machines and does not want to be on a feeding tube, we know that at the end of the day that we have to contribute to decisions that are going to benefit the patient. And in this case, we would say that this patient without the feeding tube is not going to be able to get the needed nutrients that they need through food. So in this situation, we would have to look at it and say what decision is going to benefit the patient in a health way. So then looking at justice, we want to protect the human rights and promote the role of nutrition and dietetics practitioners. So we still want to protect the human rights of this patient. We want to be respectful despite their disparities. We want to promote the fairness. Even though they are diagnosed with dementia, we still want to show that same respect and fairness to them. So we could show as nutrition and dietetic practitioners that we are doing our jobs equally, no matter who the patient is. So the role of the RDN in this situation is to educate patients on nutrition. We want to do medical nutrition therapy with the patients, developing and monitoring nutrition plans, contribute to scientific research on nutrition, work in the community to share information on nutrition with the general public, promote good health, and prevent and manage specific diseases. So breaking this down, I believe that it follows every role of the 4 principles. We could say educating patients on nutrition. We could go back to wanting to use evidence-based approach. We want to provide them truthful information. And we also are showing justice by working in the community to share this information and promoting good health, and we are preventing and managing specific diseases within the community. So that is our role as an RDN in this situation and in every situation when dealing with different types of patients. So the recommendations I would give for this specific case, the first one would be identifying a surrogate, which is a family member or a legal guardian via power of attorney for healthcare. So the power of attorney would be able to be signing a legal document that states that they are going to be the surrogate in this case for the patient, and that they are able to make decisions for the patient due to autonomy of the patient not being able to make their own self-determination in health. So usually this is the first ranked family member or legal guardian. So in this case, the daughter, if identifies as the surrogate, if she goes through the power of attorney and gets a document, she is able to make the medical decisions for her mom going forward. We also want to show respect to both the patient and the designated surrogate. So by providing truthful information and being respectful to both the patient and the family member or the legal guardian in the case, we can give them truthful information. We could let them know by the law we have to follow these certain steps, and just understand both their perspectives and not just ignore either the patient or this designated surrogate. We want to base decisions on the well-being of the patient. So again, in this case, the patient does have dementia, and even though they do not want to be on feeding tubes, the daughter is insisting if we don't have feeding tubes for her, she's going to forget to eat. So from a professional standpoint, that is something I would agree on. If the patient is not able to get those nutrients, then how are they going to be able to further survive? So the fourth point I would make in this recommendation for this case would be to consult with the physician and other staff members that are on this case to ensure ethical decisions are being made via an ethics committee. So in the ethics committee, you could take other staff members that are on this case, their physician, and come up with group ideas and make decisions based on everybody else's input. So that way you're able to talk it out with others that are in this case that have seen the patient, that know their medical history. And in that way, you are able to come together with your coworkers in an environment and learn off of each other, and also come with individual ideas to ensure that we are meeting the patient's needs, we are showing respect to the patient and their family, and we're making decisions that are going to benefit the patient going forward. So at the end of the day, based on this case, and if we follow the ethics and we follow good decision making, we are being fair, and we follow the laws and regulations and